This video is sponsored by ThingPenguin.com.
Alright, boys, girls, and assorted malcontents. Ridley here, as in Dave Ridley. New Hampshire, controversial gonzo journalist who has actually had an idea. I don't know why it took me so long to think of this, but it occurred to me there's a lot of New Hampshire liberty news that I learn about, and I call talk radio about it, especially Free Talk Live. But the fact is, I never really seem to put it all in one place. So I thought I should do that in an audio form so it becomes kind of like a podcast. And I just want to go back to, I guess, starting around late May of 2024 and what I started collecting around that point up until now. I'm reading this in October of 2024. I want to just summarize for you a lot of the things that have happened, many of which you've probably missed because it's hard to find them all in one place. And a lot of it seems like I find out about it, but it's not in the mainstream press. And sometimes it's not even in the Liberty Press. So, I guess I should do my job if I'm the Liberty Press. Anyway, so this goes back, starting back around... one thing I should clarify here. I am going to not include New Hampshire secession news or NHexit news for the most part, because that stuff is covered on the NHexit podcast, which you can find at nhexit.org. And if it's not covered, it'll eventually get covered, because we only have so much NHexit news to cover. I mean, you can do about a half hour worth of that a week, but we don't usually have more news than that. We would have to be really big and really active to accomplish that. But the New Hampshire Liberty Movement overall, that is actually big enough and active enough to generate at least that much news, quite a bit more. So anyway, that's what I want to cover. So if we go back to, let's see, if we go back to May 26th of 2024, okay, so I discovered, I had someone contact me who wanted me to talk about New Hampshire courts, about what this person was going through in the New Hampshire courts. But this person never really gave me kind of clearance to go public with their emails. So I never did. But in the process of receiving these emails, I did kind of start poking around on some of the court websites, and I discovered that the New Hampshire district courts I tried to find an email address so I could contact one of these district courts, right? And I discovered they had posted a page that tells people they have to fill out a special form in order to email the court. So okay, so for example, right now I'm clicking on this thing that says, so I go to courts.nh.gov, and if I click on, let's say, 5th Circuit District Division, Claremont, it says, quote, information regarding restricted court email. So I click on that. Instead of giving me their email address, it just says information regarding restricted email. It lists a bunch of restricted email addresses, and it says, quote, as required by Circuit Court Administrative Order 2021-06, permitted emails must be sent with a completed restricted email cover sheet, along with the documents for filing, unquote. And it also says, quote, emails sent without the complete cover sheet form and permitted documents attached will be rejected, unquote. So what's the point of having the court's email address if you have to fill out forms in order to be able to send an email to that email address? It's just a reminder of how even the the least bad government on the planet, arguably, is just not transparent and not accessible. Not transparent and accessible enough. So if I were to go to try and find, so it says like the email is even looking shifty. It's called quote Claremont restricted at courts.state.nh.us. And that's what happens when you go to courts.nh.gov and you click contact us. Now, in fairness, there is a phone number listed for the judicial branch, and maybe there's phone numbers for the district courts, the individual district courts. I'm not sure, but I just don't. I think they just like to not have a paper trail when they say something to you by email. You can prove they said it to you in a sense. But if they say it to you over the phone, it's a lot more difficult because you record them over the phone. That can be a little bit dangerous in New Hampshire because they might come after you with wiretapping charges. Anyway, there is more news, more liberty news from New Hampshire, as there is pretty much every week. So, it looks like on June 12th, I recorded that there was an interesting case where a New Hampshire resident was attempting to make a stand against the gun laws in Massachusetts. So there have been, obviously over the years, a series of New Hampshire residents who've been arrested for possessing firearms while in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts does not honor or respect New Hampshire's concealed carry license. But I think it's even worse than that. I think you're not even allowed to have a vehicle. I think you're not allowed to have a firearm in your trunk in Massachusetts if you're from New Hampshire, or no matter where you're from, if you don't have some kind of a license. So you can find out more about this fight if you go to forum.shiresociety.com, and I think I'll probably have more updates about that later. Well, one thing I do know off the top of my head is that there were two interesting things that happened. First of all, I guess it was 5 or 6 state reps filed what's called an amicus curiae brief with Massachusetts Supreme Court, and they filed this brief in support of the rights of these New Hampshire residents who were arrested or charged as a result of having a firearm in Massachusetts. Then after that, the New Hampshire Attorney General's office jumped on board and in support of these New Hampshire residents. And that actually eventually did get a lot of mainstream media coverage. Also in June of 2024, there were some liberty activists, I guess it was Libertarian Party folks to some extent, I guess the Libertarian Party organized it, and the Nashua mayor had denied a request by a resident to put up a pine tree flag in front of Nashua City Hall. So the pine tree flag is sort of, you could almost think of it as New Hampshire's original flag, which was I guess created in honor of a thing called the Pine Tree Riot, which was a precursor to the Revolutionary War. And the Nashua mayor refused this request to put up this flag. So some people staged a demonstration outside, and the Nashua mayor subsequently made the comment that people had been issuing threats to one of his staff members, at least one. So I contacted the mayor, and he failed to get back to me. I asked him if he could specify who'd made these threats so that I could reach out to them and tell them to stop making threats. I mean, not that I have the power to stop them, but I can at least raise concerns. But the fact that he never got back to me makes me wonder if any threats were actually issued. He also, there was a media article about it, and I noticed that he didn't actually quote anyone or post any original messages or any links to any original messages or anything like that. It was just kind of, we're just supposed to take his word for it. ManchesterInkLink.com also in probably June, possibly late May, reported on one of these things that people unfortunately don't raise enough concerns about, and that was a raid in Manchester. I think they called it Operation Mayday. They arrested 26 people. They called them violent offenders and people who had done drug crimes. At least that's what the InkLink article said. But it says, quote, in InkLink, it says, quote, Manchester police worked in collaboration with the U.S. Marshals Service, NH State Probation and Parole, and the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office on an initiative targeting violent offenders and those involved with dangerous drugs, unquote. Well, again, the problem is they just lump those two together as if they're the same thing, which they're not. So it's a series of arrests that apparently occurred from May 28th to June 4th. So they list a lot of, InkLink lists a lot of different people, and yes, some of them have violent crimes attached to the arrest, or they're charged with violent crimes. But look at this one. There's one arrested for, quote, HCSO capias dash bail jumping, comma, controlled possession, unquote. Controlled drug possession, unquote. Well, what the F-bomb is HCSO capias? And we've got so many crimes in the U.S. now that you can name one and no one even knows what it means. I don't even know enough to tell you whether that's victimless crime or violent crime. But innocent until proven guilty. Here's one for, quote, violation of parole, unquote. Well, again, we don't know what the person was originally arrested for. Maybe they were just arrested for saying something on Facebook they weren't supposed to say, because people do get arrested for that sort of thing, or at least charged. Although, in fairness, I guess, according to the article, these are all drug arrests or violent crime arrests. So maybe this person was just arrested for drugs initially. Here's one arrested for, quote, controlled drug possession, unquote. Well, so F-bombing what? Just because you have a controlled drug in your possession does not make you even a bad person, let alone someone who should go to jail. Let's start separating out the victimless criminals from the victim criminals. I mean, it looks like about a quarter of the people on this list could just be taken off based on what's here on this list. If they've done something else that hurts somebody, then we can talk about that. But I am not at all interested in having anyone use my money to put these people in jail just for drug possession. You've got to have something else on them. And why does the federal government have to be involved in any of this? Where is any of it authorized in the Constitution? I bet no one else is raising these concerns about these arrests. It's like no one cares. I can talk about it here, and I have called Free Talk Live about it. Okay, now let's try an experiment here. I have this theory. I call it the Adama Theory from Battlestar Galactica. If you speak softly, like Commander Adama does when he's on the bridge, then people will listen more closely to you. For instance, when Commander Adama says, bring the Galactica to alert, and you can barely hear him. Well, everybody brings the Galactica to alert really quickly. They jump to the tune of every note that he plays because he's speaking so softly. So I'm going to try speaking like that. You tell me which voice you like better. Okay, so what's the next thing we've got here? Okay, so one of the problems that we've had with some of the free staters who've gotten into the New Hampshire legislature is they get attached to legislation that we could be called, I call it legislation that attempts to ban our way to freedom. And I really think you can't do that. So there was this one bill where at least one or more free staters got involved in this bill to try and ban private companies from putting mRNA in food. And for those of you who are not aware, mRNA is this stuff that was used in the COVID vaccine. It's a type of, a new type of vaccine. Yeah, I don't think I want that in my food either. But if you're trying to pass a new law to ban that, then the problem with that is that you're forcing taxpayers to underwrite what you think is better for society instead of letting the market make that choice. And the way I look at it, we've already got, I think, about 35,000 pages of laws in New Hampshire, just at the state level alone. So, we really need 35,001 pages? I'm not certain regarding that number, by the way. It's just my rough estimate based on the size of the file that lists all of New Hampshire's laws. Oh, here's a good one. I may get cut off here because my battery's about to run down. If that happens, then what will occur is I will finish this story in the next video. So according to my notes from July 3rd of 2024, actually this was a news release that I sent out, so I'll just quote the news release. Quote, local secessionists and Republicans are boiling mad after a federal employee apparently burned a pile of their mail and bragged about it on social media. Winchester, New Hampshire, 7/1/2024. On June 29th, a wild message appeared on Facebook, apparently posted by Winchester postal worker Paul Landry. Subquote, I found some good use of this trash, the post reads, referring to a newsletter mailed by local Republicans. Subquote, makes for an excellent fire starter. End subquote. Under the text are two pictures, one showing a copy of the newsletter, another apparently shows the copies burning on a grill. Whoever is using the Paul Landry Facebook account subsequently claimed these copies were extras. But in a thread already more than 100 comments long, various Winchester residents claim they never received their expected edition of the popular mailer. Some are wondering if theirs ended up in a taxpayer-funded ash pile. Russell Canning, a local advocate for New Hampshire independence, is one of the advertisers in the publication. He says he was looking forward to getting his copy, but it never arrived and may have been intentionally destroyed. This is one of those, subquote, this is one of those things that's another example of things that might not be happening to us if we have things more decentralized, Canning says. I think if it was more locally controlled, a lot of us would feel better about it. Unsubquote. Canning, who earlier this year attended a state house hearing on New Hampshire secession, runs NHexit.org. He also mans a semi-weekly secession booth in downtown Keene, advocating for New Hampshire to leave the U.S. Meanwhile, he's apparently forced to pay the salary of unaccountable Fed censors who can't even get mail delivery right. If the Fed employee Landry really did this, he's pushed another New Hampshire meter closer to independence. Landry's apparent FB profile, and then I post a link. Winchester NH Uncensored, and then I post a link. Updates, more details, forum.shiresociety.com. Dave Ridley, NHexit.com, independence without enmity, unquote. Okay, so that's just a direct read of my news release. I hope it's understandable in audio form, probably easier to read. But again, you can read it at forum.shiresociety.com. So I'm sorry I kind of broke my policy there and read you an NHexit piece of news. But I doubt NHexit.org will read the entire news release on their podcast. So hopefully I'm at least providing something different. All right, so more NHexit, or at least more NH Liberty news will come up in the next video. I hope this was useful. Post your thoughts in the comments below as to whether this kind of video / podcast is useful.
Do you value your privacy? Want hardware that works? Get Linux at New Hampshire's very own thingpenguin.com.